Hi, welcome back. We'll now continue the demo of the delivery phase accelerator or the delivery tool of the Simpli5 framework. We explained at the highest level how the design phase can be simplified and can be made simpler on a single canvas that a consultant will be able to access and update information based on his discussion with the customer. We'll now move to the build phase of the project. The build phase of the project needs to be first initiated. As you see here, when you try to click the build, it says you need to initiate a build phase. And that initiation happens only after I build what are called the end-to-end scenarios or user stories, right? So these processes that were designed so far are unit process blocks. But what really runs the business is the end-to-end stories, right? The user stories or end-to-end scenarios, they call it. And that's what is the use case of the E2E scenario builder. When I click on this button, it opens up as this is what almost a gamification of how user stories are built today in projects. If you see here on this right is exactly the BPML or the process master list or the building blocks of processes that we have identified so far or created so far. If you remember the bundle buying, we had new process, detectors ordering, etc. that got added, right? So this is a reflection of that. Now, before I start, I need to first identify how many sprints I need. So validation sprints about 3, let us say. What are the work streams before all the scenarios have to be categorized into work streams? Let me create a work stream called inbound logistics. It's just a category of the end-to-end scenarios. I can start by creating a new scenario. I click on button, which says domestic ordering or import ordering delivered at DC. It's linked into a scenario that the user or the business understands. I need to assign it to a work stream called inbound logistics. Assign to sprint number 1. So which validation sprint will I execute this in? Some description, import ordering scenario for the customer where goods get delivered and put away in DC. Right. So now I need to start adding the processes. So these process steps can come from different process areas. The first process or first step under this will come from the ordering process, of course, where I select create purchase order. The next step will be to release the purchase order, then to transmit the purchase order to the vendor. Post that, I need to receive the goods. So the receive goods processes are under a different process area called move DC operations goods receipts, where I had added some process steps called receive ASA information from the vendor, then create an inbound delivery document, perform the goods receipt, then go back to ordering again, where I need to perform an LIV, receive the vendor invoice, create a LIV document for that. Then it ends with finance, accounts payable, where I have a small one step attached, let's say settle payment to the vendor. So these comprise of process and process steps from across various process areas to create one meaningful end-to-end scenario. I can save this process, which creates a scenario script of user story called import ordering. It's in red right now because I had not selected in scope. So let us say I say it's in scope and then save. Then you'll see it's go back to red black. Similarly, I can add several such scenarios. Upon adding this, I can also generate scenario scripts. This is the next level of automation where I am automating or automating the process of creation of this test script of an end-to-end scenario. Let us say it is E2E script of import, which looks something like this. Again, a configurable template in which I had specified what is the scenario description, scenario summary, and each such scenario has process steps where I am giving placeholders for the consultant who will test it to capture the outputs in the form of the document numbers or screenshots, etc. So this is automating that part of the work already. Of course, as you will notice, I mean, as I didn't explain, but you could obviously go to this process and add some description of the particular step relevant for this. And you could adjust the sequencing of these processes and process steps on this scenario by just these buttons here. Okay, so of course, one of the things about this whole knowledge management here is I can uh, there is a repository available where I can add other scenarios from here, which let's say domestic ordering with DST. We'll import and add this into this, saying there is new scenario which the customer may think and would want to add to this particular list, which comes with its own set of process steps, etc., that I may want to add later. Right, so it gets added into this list. Once I'm done with addition of all these scenarios, I can go ahead and I initiate the build phase. The build phase gets initiated. Close this document. Then I click on the build phase. It takes me to a different tab in which I have list of all the processes that have been agreed with the customer. So first step is to realize or build these units. Each such unit has a build status to maintain and a UT status to maintain. Going back to the ordering scenario, I click on this button, will explain. So this particular unit called standard ordering will be completed once I'm able to configure these process steps and develop these particular rise of elements. So once I have completed these process steps and these recifs. That is only when I can go ahead and change the status of this particular process step to complete it. And what does the realization pool gets access to? This particular this particular sheet or phase of the project in which each such process, when I double click on this, it generates the corresponding process context document, right? Context document, ordering, which is a combination of two sets of information. It has two tabs to it. One first tab is about the process context. It basically is the information that you captured against it. What are the process variants that were there? Which end-to-end scenario is it relevant for? Any changes that were captured against this process, etc. And more importantly, and as importantly, the unit test script, which again has got automated in terms of what is the process, each process step that was captured against this, each the expected results of this, and then what are the process variants that are available in this process, and then which is where the unit testing of the process is done and results captured by the realization pool or realization factory that takes care of developing or building these particular units. So once these units are done and each of these process status are set to complete, that's when you move on to the next phase, which is the validation phase. The validation phase basically is exactly the the same set of scenarios that we had created, where if you remember we had two scenarios, one which has the process steps that were identified and added. So these process steps are then validated as a end-to-end scenario for this particular use case or user story. And once that is done, the status has to be set to complete. Once all such scenarios get to status complete, that is when the uh, the validation of the entire agreement with the customer is completed. Right? So that ends the a quick but and a dirty demonstration of some of the features available in this tool, that MVP of which has been built and completed. So as you see here, the it had three phases. The first stage was the design phase, in which the consultant has access to a canvas, the same canvas, which was originally wireframed in a scoping phase. So all the information that got captured in the scoping phase gets imported into this. I go into each of the process, then refine that further. Any changes get captured as changes against that particular process. the details of which are captured. I have automation available in terms of being able to load from a repository and then generate the blueprint documents directly from that particular the same screen. The details are captured along with whatever changes were done to the particular process directly. Then the next phase was about going to the end-to-end scenario builder and adding additional adding my end-to-end stories that is relevant for the customer, and then initiate the build phase, which then allows me to go to the build phase where I get the list of all the processes that are relevant for this particular customer, where I get to double click on each of these to generate the units scenarios, unit test cases, and the process context information, which is used by the realization teams to build and realize the corresponding process steps, which is configuration or development of any corresponding gaps. So once each of these process gets to completed status, the units gets complete to status, then it moves on to the validation phase where I have the end-to-end scenarios where the process steps are listed, and each such process step is tested in that particular end-to-end user story and set to complete. Once that is done and completed, it's handed over back to the customer saying all the end-to-end scenarios or user stories that you wanted me to configure and build are completed as per requirement, and handed it over back to the customer, which then takes it over to the rest of the phases of the project, which include your final preparations, data migrations, and cutover activities relevant for the project to go live. Thank you. This indeed was a quick demo of the tool, but hopefully has given you a good perspective of what has gone into the thought process behind making this a consultant-friendly tool, and a tool that can really accelerate the way and change the way we have been conventionally trying to deliver the projects.